Welcome back to The Weekend. Donald Trump resorted to crimes to try to stay in office after the 2020 election. That's what Special Counsel Jack Smith argues in a shell filing recently unsealed, putting Trump's legal woes back in the spotlight just 1 month before the 2024 election. Smith's filing insists that Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election were not official acts and don't fall under the scope of the Supreme Court's presidential immunity ruling. The 165-page redacted document reveals new and disturbing details of Trump's efforts to cling to power in the weeks after losing the 2020 election. Joining us now is conservative lawyer George Conway. Welcome back to the table, my friend.
Happy to be here. Always fun.
So among those details, a little bit more on the way that the former president felt about his own vice president. Upon receiving a phone call alerting him that Pence had been taken to a secure location, person 15 rushed to the dining room to inform the defendant in hopes that the defendant would take action to ensure Pence's safety. Instead, after P15 delivered the news, the defendant looked at him and said, only, quote, so what?
It's classic Donald Trump. Cares about nobody, nothing other than himself. It's all about him. Doesn't matter whether people got hurt or are going to get hurt. On January 6th, it didn't matter that his vice president, who'd been loyal to him for 3.5 years or 4 years, might be in danger. He doesn't care. He's a sociopath. And that's just more evidence of that man, of Donald Trump's sickness, a sickness that we can't allow, as Liz Cheney put it so well this week. I mean, we can't allow a man completely lacking in compassion and decency to be president again.
How, George, help us understand a little bit better. I mean, based off of what you just said, and Alicia sort of framing this question the way she did, why then do people out there not weigh that? I mean, when did along the way did we change the idea that, an individual with these psychopathies and these, sociopathic behaviors, that's what we now see in a president, and we're okay with that?
Yeah, I think the problem is that, and the real danger of narcissistic sociopaths like this man, like coming into office, they create a permission structure for other people to be their worst selves. We all have choices every day on whether to do right or to do wrong, or to speak a lie or to tell the truth. And he gives everybody permission to do the very worst things, because they look and say, well, if he can do it and I'm with him, I can do it. And that is a truly corrosive effect that having a man like this in our public, even beyond the question of right, left, and policy, this is the true danger of having a person like this as a leader in public life.
I mean, as you were speaking, I just thought about Mark Robinson. I thought about the congressman from Louisiana that tweeted that always has a little racist tweets, but tweeted recently about Haitian people in this country. I think about all of these candidates and individuals in elected office that have now popped up
out of nowhere, just seemingly right there.
Because Donald Trump has given them this permission structure.
They want to be like him. And people say it's okay. It doesn't matter.
The words that Donald Trump has been speaking, even throughout this whole time, show up in this filing from Jack Smith along those lines. Like he writes, in the years after January 6th, the defendant, Donald Trump, reiterated his support for and allegiance to rioters who broke into the Capitol, calling them patriots and hostages, providing them financial assistance, and reminiscing about January 6th as a beautiful day. The defendant has also stated that if reelected, he will pardon individuals convicted of crimes on January 6th. Jack Smith is basically saying, well, one, he's basically saying, like, look, he done said all this stuff. This is also why I think my case is strong. But also, I also think this is, people should read this as he is telling us what he's going to do, people. Take Donald Trump at his word, okay? This isn't just hyperbole, because I think a lot of people excuse it as, that's just how he talks, but he doesn't really mean it. I think he means it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this piece of evidence has both retrospective effect and a prospective. The retrospective effect is the evidentiary value that Jack Smith sees in it, which shows the man's intent. the man's intent was to destroy our republic. And then in the future, that's the perspective messages to the public that people can glean from public filings like this that explain what's going on or what happened in the past. They can say, wait a minute, this person will do it again. And you're exactly right. That's exactly right.
Here's part of why I think that becomes particularly relevant, which is there was that moment in the vice presidential debate that we all caught towards the end of the debate where J.D. Vance was asked about what happened about the election in 2020, what happened on January 6th, sort of pretends January 6th didn't happen. And I think for all of us who care about democracy, it was a catch your breath moment of,
clarity. Yeah.
Yes, of clarity, yes. But we all know someone who was like, why are we talking about 2020? Why are we talking about something that happened 4 years ago? And so to me, part of what is in this filing is answering that question. It's because we're not only looking at things that happened, we are looking at things that he plans to do in the future. Don't take Jack Smith's word for it. Take the ex-president at his own word.
Right. Yeah, I think that for me is the critical point. And that moment in the debate should have been clarifying. But the fact, to your point, Alicia, that people go, well, why are we still talking about January 20th? Well, we're talking about it because, as Simone just read, the defendant has stated that if reelected, he will pardon individuals convicted of crimes on January 6th. The defendant, has hailed this as a beautiful day. So we can't dismiss that. We can't just push under the rug the fact that a former president of the United States literally tried to steal our Constitution away from us, tear it up, and create something else right in front of our eyes.
It's why there's a case. They tried to steal an election. They tried to steal an election.
And the fact is that J.D. Waltz got that in on the last drive of the debate. But that's, Coach Waltz, that's the whole point.
That's the whole point.
I mean, I used to care a lot about marginal tax rates. I used to care about a lot of it. Okay? Well, marginal tax rates don't do me any good if I don't live in a free country.
Come on.
So the only issue that mattered was that last 5 minutes of the debate.
And I still don't understand why it's like pulling teeth with with about 47% of the country, and of that 47%, they're all not MAGA, they're all not hardcore. So I'm like, what is the trigger then to get you to see in a clarifying moment that's the core of what this election is about?
Here's the thing. I think there's an exhaustion factor creeping in. I mean, maybe it's anecdotal from people saying that they're looking at these crowds and looking for yard signs, but you don't feel that level of energy that they had before. And I think his own base is exhausted. And I think the whole country is exhausted by him.
Exhausted.
But the people who want to vote him out, who have been against him all along, and the people who've come to understand his true evil, I mean, those people are motivated to get out. The other people who are sick of him are his own people, and it's like, all right, I don't want to go to another rally. Do I have to get up on election day?
And when they go,
it's like, how many envelopes do I have to? Oh, these envelopes are bad.
Right.
I'm not going to vote.
Right.
There was a story about that this week, and now I'm blanking on where I read it. But they went in. These reporters went to a Trump rally and then asked the people who were leaving why they were leaving. And one woman said, "Well, he was an hour late. Okay, so you don't have the decency to come on time. I'm leaving." And then they said it was just nasty and the ranting and the vitriol. And one woman came with a friend of hers or a family member that's voting for Kamala Harris, and she left. She's like, "Well, dang it, I'm voting for Kamala Harris too now." So to your point, a number of people are fed up. I mean, Alicia,
you can also only hear.
It was the Washington Post,
so
by the way.
Before you're like, I can't. One more time. Here's where I would sort of tie these things together. To your point about fatigue, I think there's political fatigue. I also think there's the fatigue that we often come back to at this table, which is the fatigue with the lack of accountability.
Yeah.
And so I want you to sort of put on your attorney hat and pull back the curtain for me on what you think Jack Smith's strategy was here, understanding that he's not going to be able to prosecute any of these cases against Donald Trump in time for this election.
Well, look, I mean, he should be prosecuting this case early next year. This case is going to go to trial if Trump is not elected president. And the Supreme Court, the whole proceedings with these appeals from the D.C. Circuit to the Supreme Court. That took 6 or 7 months. And then, they passed through the summer. It's time for the proceedings that the Supreme Court directed and that Donald Trump asked for, by the way, start for real, because the Supreme Court ruled back in June. And, Jack Smith is not, it doesn't look like he's in a terrible hurry, but I'm happy that he was able to file this thing before the election.
And I think it's also this, I know we're going to go to a quick break, but I think it's also important to note that we are here, right, because Donald Trump's lawyers pushed us into this space, because we could have been past this by now. But that strategy of, delay, appeal on every little thing over and over again pushes these cases back. So now to hear Donald Trump and his ilk whining like little babies about the fact that this is put out in front of the country again, this is the clock you set. This could have been resolved in August. It could have been resolved in June. But no, you wanted it here. So now Jack Smith is like, okay.
The district judge is going like this, just doing it, just proceeding in the normal course.